in Tennessee.
Big man T-Bone! Oh!
What's going on, man?
What's going on with you?
Just getting back right now.
Oh, it's been a little while.
Yes, it's been a long while. A little while's putting it mildly. What's going on with you, brother?
Are you still larger than life?
Yeah, I'm still larger than life. About 320, excuse me.
320.
320. Yeah. Still doing the damn thing.
How's the sweet taste of freedom?
Oh, my God. It's been over a year now, so it's beautiful. It's lovely. It's great. It's fantastic. And I needed to hear your voice. I needed this charge of good energy. I needed it. More than you know.
Are you still in AZ?
Yeah, still in Arizona.
Are they restricting you?
Why are you hesitant to talk to me, man? What's going on? You online or something or what?
No, I'm recording this because I'm hoping to play it for the viewers, if that's okay with you.
John, you are smoother than a cat. You know, cats are pretty damn slick. You are smooth. I've watched a couple of your interviews. Honestly, I couldn't believe you interviewed that guy. I was like, what the world? And he was just talking, and I was like, I seen a couple of those big dudes over there in England. I guess they did time. They were thugs. I was like, wow.
I interviewed.
So how's your family?
I interviewed some of the.
Yeah, I've seen you interview.
I interviewed some of the founders of the California AB.
Yeah, I saw that. That dude, Mike McDonald, I think his name.
Michael Thompson and Casper.
Michael Thompson.
Yeah, that was interesting. But speaking of family,
little he's in witness protection, isn't he?
I don't know where he is, to be honest. I think they're trying to get him though.
Oh, they are trying to get him. What do you mean?
Yeah, but
he's on with that KOS, a list. Him and a bunch of those guys on that KOS list.
Yeah,
talking about stuff like that.
I can imagine.
Okay, so how's your family doing, man?
Oh, little baby Ziggy just walked in as you said that.
Little baby Zig, huh?
Yeah, big baby Zig. Say hello, Ziggy. Say hello, Jan, to T-Bone.
Hi, T-Bone. Say hello, baby.
Hi.
Hi, lovely to speak with you. Sean's told me lots about you.
Beautiful wife. How did he get so lucky? I saw that picture. I said, what in the world?
I know. He must wake up every day and feel so lucky.
I do. I wake up every day and think I'm in a dream, Jen. I didn't know how I got so lucky.
Well, you're a smooth guy, man. You're smooth and very smart. I guess University of, what was it? Don't tell me. Wait. Guess what an M. But a suck-ass soccer team. The town you from?
Manchester United.
Manchester, right. That's where you got your degree, right, from Manchester?
Liverpool is my degree.
Oh, Liverpool.
Yeah.
The Beatles.
The Beatles. Yeah.
So, how is it over there in England right now? What's the weather like?
Oh, right now it's cold, rainy, grey.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought global warming affected that part of the world because I know the rivers in Germany dried up. I thought the things dried up over there in England. Is it still green or is it brown?
Where I'm looking out, it's green.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I miss it.
Well, you need to
come.
I
might be going back to Virginia here pretty soon.
So, are you not under any restrictions then from the state of Arizona?
Not really, no. Nothing can't be resolved or fixed. I mean, like $65 all it takes to, lifting the restrictions as far as travel out of state. $65 to do that.
Good.
That's all it takes.
Good.
Yeah. So what kind of vehicle are you driving? Are you taking public transportation?
No, I got an SUV.
Get out of here. Range Rover.
No, that's the. Didn't you want a Range Rover, Jen? I've got an.
What year?
Like 3 years old, I think. 3-4 years.
Go ahead, big boy. I hear you, man. I hear you. I'm driving a 2022.
Oh.
Smooth. It's not that bad. It's smooth. It's smooth. I can fit in it. Takes a little time.
You can fit in it.
I was thinking about some of the stories you and I talked about, and I said, it was last week, I was driving Uber, right? And these two guys, they were drunk. They weren't fall down drunk, but they were drunk. And so they had, one guy had a 12-pack and a beer in his hand. The other guy had a 6-pack with a beer in his hand. And they were all messed up. And so they wouldn't get in the car like that. I said, hey, you can't get in there with open containers, bro. That's not cool.
Yeah.
So he gets in anyway. And the other guy's talking to these other two dudes. And I said, hey, man. I said, you can't get in an open container. So this guy goes, you stupid Uber driver. Get on the road.
No.
I said, what you say? I said, hold on, bro. I just asked you not to get in here with the can, man. So why don't you step out the car, bro, and call another Uber? I'm not going to drive you like that. He said, you asshole. You think you are, and all this talk. I took the seatbelt off. I got out, opened the door. I said, hey, bro, get out. He says, I'm not going anywhere. I grabbed him by his hair, grabbed him by his arm, and yanked his ass out of the car. And I put him on the pavement, And he said, well, you think you're a bad asshole, man? Let me show you something. I hit him in the neck. And then the other guy, he wants to intervene. And, I just let him throw a punch, and I stepped out of the way and hit him in his neck. I said, damn, I still got it. But I told myself, I was thinking about you and me and all the conversations we had, all the letters I wrote to, and all the combat I've had over the years, and how I was graced without severely getting injured.
I know.
I was fortunate, man.
Yeah, you're blessed.
I was fortunate.
You're blessed?
Definitely blessed. Definitely blessed, my friend.
Yeah.
Definitely blessed.
Listen,
so how's it?
Say a little message for the T-Bone Appreciation Society, and then I'll stop recording, and I'll speak to you off the record then.
Okay. T-Bones Appreciation Society. I appreciate you guys. I've often wanted to meet a lot of you. Hopefully one day we'll be able to, converse or see each other in person. You have no idea what it meant to be being locked up, to have people who cared and who appreciated me as an individual. I really thank you all, and I really thank Sean for being the man that he is, him and his family. Hopefully soon I'll be over there in Mario, England, enjoying the greenery of Hadrian's Wall. I really want to see that. Peace to you guys, and hopefully see you soon.
He used to knock guys out and then suck their There's moments on the yard, as you know, that everything is mellow and nobody is really watching or paying attention, because it's a sense in the air that everything's good. And a lot of predators, they wait for those moments. And so this guy jumps out and he grabs a kid that evening and pulled him behind some dumpsters. This is what I remember. And it might have been another. He did more things to the kid than that, but he took the kid and choked him. Choked him within an inch. You know what that means. And so the kid was terrified. He was shocked. He never experienced anything like that. And so then he gets the kid in the cell. And simply put. And the kid, what a psychological attack. If you look at that, you stare at somebody and the person feels you staring at them, and then they become intimidated by your power, in that environment. And then you hide in the shadows and you act nonchalant. And when the kid comes in striking distance, because you know the person's routine, you jump out and you grab them and you take them into a dark spot. Even though there's some lighting, but it isn't enough lighting to make people notice. And he behind the dumpsters, I forget the kitchen number, but you were there, and there's dumpsters, and behind those dumpsters, no one can see. And so the kid goes by innocently, chokes him within an inch, terrifies him, and then says, "Won't talk to him," gets him in the cell, and he brutalized the kid so viciously, so freaking viciously. And the kid gave up. He didn't fight back. And they turned him over and they pulled his pants down and they shoved the broomstick up his.
Hey, everybody, would you believe it? After all these years and all the support from the people in the T-Bone Appreciation Society, some people were even saying, does T-Bone exist? Well, guess what, folks? He is here. He is a free man. He is out finally. After serving so many years, I have lost count. And he's here to tell everybody today how he's doing. And you can also support him. There's the link down there to help him restart his life if you want to make a donation to T-Bone. In fact, all the donations that have come in over the years and everyone's love and support. So what message do you have, Tim, for all of the T-Bone Appreciation Society people?
Hello, everyone. T-Bone Appreciation Society. Thank you, and thank you so very much for your support. I can't tell you how good it made me feel to know that there's people who care, who really care, who have the strength and character, compassion, of empathy, of true warriors that care about other people. My heart is overflowing with gratitude for you all and for Sean to, do all that you have done. And God willing, one day I'll be able to shake your hands and give you a hug. I look forward to those days soon because I'm not going to do anything until I get there to look out for my baby brother Sean and to meet you guys. Peace and blessings to each and every one of you. And thank you.
And viewers, if you're watching, if you want to continue to support T-Bone, there is a donation link below this video to help T-Bone restart his life. And Tim, for viewers who are not familiar with your story, do you want to just tell them how many years you have served?
In what, the military or prison?
In both.
Well, I don't like talking about the Marine Corps. Any true warrior doesn't like to rehash, experiences. But I joined the Marine Corps at a young age. I played football, of course. I got kicked out of school because I went on a date with a cheerleader. And I became moon-eyed. And moon-eyed means I fell in love because cheerleaders are a special breed of women. That's the best way to put it. And there's regulations and rules in place in college football, college sports, and NFL and professional sports. You're not supposed to mess with cheerleaders. And I did, and I got in trouble. And so I left school. My uncle came home from Europe. He was in the 10th Special Forces because my mother called him and told me to make a choice what I'm going to do. And me and 10 of my homeboys went to Alexandria, Virginia, Duke Street, and we walked in a recruiting office, and all the officers, the National Guard, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, all had these huge offices, but like 8 recruiters in each office and their desks. And behind us, we didn't see, was this little room with 2 small desks in it. And 2 Marines stepped out. And this bull neck buck sergeant stepped out and he said, "Hey, you." And I said, everybody turned around and all these recruiters came out, 30 or 40 of them. They came out their offices and they all stood in the hallway. And my homie said, "He's talking to you." I said, "You talking to me?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm talking to you." "Yeah, you." He said, "If you knock me down, you can be in one of these outfits, these services. But if I knock you down, you got to be a Marine." And they said, "My homeboy, you better get him." I said, "I don't worry about that chump." He said, "You're the..." And so I said, "You call me a..." He goes, "Yeah, you're a..." And I rushed him. And I made a mistake doing that. I ended up on my back. I weighed 242 pounds. I was benching at that time 385 pounds twice. And on a good day, I do it 3 times. I was squatting 450. I was deadlifting 560. God had gave me strength. And that man must have weighed 180 pounds. But he put me on my back in a split second. I couldn't breathe. They got me up and they threw me in a seat. And they said, "You sign right there. Do you want to be a Marine?" I said, "Yeah, I want to be a Marine." He said, "You take this test." They gave me the ASVAB test. I scored pretty high on it. And the next day I was on a bus to Beaufort, South Carolina. And went across the causeway to Paris Island. And I graduated boot camp. And 99% of all the men and women who graduated that day, when they put that eagle, globe, and anchor into your hand, we all started crying because we made it. And it was hell. No football practice, no nothing ever compared to what I went through on Paris Island. And after that, I got out of the service. I was looking for something to replace the adrenaline, the excitement of being in the service, and I couldn't find it. So I went dark, went to the dark side. I started doing uh, personal security that was non-lethal, and from that, I started selling cocaine. And this is in the 80s, remind you, when cocaine was at its heyday. And I started making money. And then I started doing more private security. Then I became part of a crew. And things spiraled downhill. Even though they might sound glamorous in certain ways, it was crazy and it was stupid. And I regret that part of my life. And so I had to start over again in certain aspects. And in the meantime, I got married, got divorced, had a couple kids who I love dearly, and I I paid the price of, the pain of separation from your children when I decided to do what I did, and ended up in prison. Got out after a few years. Um, Started working for a company, and there were certain parts of the company that were dark, and so I started doing collections and for the company, and made a lot of money, but dirty money doesn't last, you know. And so one thing to another thing, and I, you know, got married again, had some more kids. It didn't last because neither one of us, were ready for that type of commitment. And I, I continued to do the things that were in my heart in prison. And what was in my heart was, helping other people. So I continued to grow in strength. And when I saw people that were weaker than me being taken advantage of, I always stepped up and, stopped it if I could, or said something to that person who was doing it to make them realize the error they were making, and to understand the value of human dignity, and not shaming people or making people feel less than who they are as human beings. So I got in a lot of conflicts for that, but that was
Tim,
worth it.
to give an example of that, could you tell the viewers the story of Nate?
Um, there's a guy in prison named Nate. Nate was a basketball genius. He could play basketball. He was very, very good. And believe me, in prison, when you play basketball, you're playing basketball. It's physical. It's finesse. It's basketball. And when you step on the court, you better know what you're doing. You gotta know how to play defense. You gotta know how to play offense. You gotta know how to know the fundamentals. This guy Nate was a badass, but Nate liked to have sex with young men. Um, Not mutual agreement sex. What Nate used to do was and he would get these young guys strung out on it. And when they came back for more, he would con them into letting him have sex with them, or for him to give them and all these young men, they didn't do it because they wanted to do it, but they did it because they were put in a position sneakily by Nate to have a drug addiction. He manipulated them. And so I couldn't take it any longer. I went to Nate's cell one day, and he told me to come in. We had a conversation. He was very smooth. He picked up a shank. It was about an 8-inch shank. And I wasn't close enough to prevent something. And in hand-to-hand combat, or close quarter combat, you have to be close enough to a person so they can't do what they do with their weapon. And I I left after I told him to stop. Well, he cussed me out, told me to mind my own business, that I'm a punk, and all this talk, get the fuck out of his cell. And so I left. 2 days go by. It was at night. I walked outside. It was cool. It was kind of cold. I think it was in November. And I stood against a wall and allowed myself to blend in with my surroundings. I let my energy leave my presence. And I went from one place to another place. And about 40 feet away, I watched Nate Selly come out of his room. and he didn't lock the door. So I went in, I stood by the toilet, and to my surprise, here comes Nate. About 3 minutes later, well, I said, "Hi, Nate," and he jumped straight up, man. It was funny. It was like a cat. He jumped straight up, and he threw a punch that I was leaning back on. I hit him in his body twice. I made him crap on himself, shit on himself. And I said, "This is what you get for manipulating them young men, so you can have sex with them in their anal sex." And he goes, "Well, they like it." I said, "No, you like it. And they always complain about you." And he got off the floor stinking, and he threw another punch. I put him in what I call a cat hole, but it's a sleeper hole. And I put him to sleep. I laid him on the floor. His cellie came back. And he thought Nate had met his demise, and that wasn't the case. So Nate um, they took him up front to medical because he was breathing, and he didn't tell them what happened to him. But the next day, SSU calls me up. They didn't do anything because they said they saw other people go in his cell after me, so they couldn't say it was me. But they saw me on camera come out, and they saw me on camera go in. And later on that day, can't say his name, of course, but one of the officers came to me and they all said thank you. Who's all? He said every officer that works here said thank you because they knew what Nate was doing and they didn't like it either. So that's just one story.
So, viewers, Tim T-Bone has risked his life over the decades he spent in prison, helping people he didn't even know for no reward whatsoever. And he wasn't just knocking these guys out. It wasn't that easy. I mean, I have heard so many of his stories. I have witnessed him in action. I have heard all of the people speak so highly of him who he has helped. And there's situations where people had river rocks in socks, were smashing him in the head, trying to kill him. There was people trying to shank him. He was within inches of losing his life on more than one occasion.
That's true.
These young people, for these young people who didn't even know him. So T-Bone has got the biggest heart in the world, folks. And people who've been with me since we started the blog back in 2004, John's Jail Journal, when I was just writing down T-Bone's stories, are well aware of his heroism. But I've got a lot more followers since then who are probably not familiar with your story, Tim. And I'm sure these people would love to hear more and they would want to support you.
There's a lot of things that took place in prison that I cannot say I'm proud of. A lot of those guys in prison who like to have sex with other men, which is anyone's business. That's their business if you want to have sex with another person. If it's mutual, then it's mutual. But in prison, it's never mutual in this degree. It's always some type of manipulation or forcing. And there's a lot of people come to prison that don't have the physicality or the mental abilities to challenge or stand up to some of these guys. And when I saw a young man get cornered and guys purposely taunt him and to intimidate him, and he walks with his head down, it made me cry. Because I saw a young man being degraded, being shamed, being brutalized. And some people are cold. They're empty inside. They have no feeling. They have no regard for other human beings. All they want is to feel the power that they have over other people to harm them. And I stepped up on multiple occasions, and you know, to see the life come back in a person's eyes as they pick their head back up away from the shame of being degraded. You know, it felt good. It really did, you know, to see that spark. You know, I feel good about who I am. I'm in love with who I am because helping people is what it's all about. It's not about just because you're large or you have some ability to fight or combat abilities that you should not utilize them for bad. You know, I utilize what God's given me to help people. And I'm not saying that God put me in prison. I put myself in prison. But while I was there, God did use me to do the right things, either say the positive things or to do something to help someone who was being victimized by people who were rapists, people who were, you know, in there for murder or child molestation or whatever, you know, who didn't care about other human beings. And some people would sit in a corner and they would just watch and learn how to find ways to get other people in those environments. Sean knows, he was there. But God put me in Sean's life to just use that part of who I am that he gave me strength to do to help if there's a time to help. And that's what all of us are here to do for one another. We're here to look out for each other. We're here to develop and encourage and to speak positive things to one another so that we become who we're supposed to be. It's not right to see a man or a woman who doesn't feel good about themselves and for someone to sit there and look at them and say, hey, tough it up. No. If you have the ability to give a positive word or to help some type of way, you do it. That's what we're here for. And so that's what I did in prison.
So, Tim, the viewers that have been with you for many, many years, I posted your photo yesterday on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. And they are all like, wow, we are so waiting to hear from the big man after all these years of following him, wondering what happened to him. So could you just explain first, like, how many years in prison have you served? And what was it like finally getting out this time?
The first one I did 8 years straight. Then another 9 months violation time. Then the second one I did 3.5 years. The third one I did 8 years. And this one I did 11.
That is 31 and a half years.
Of my life, yes. Locked up.
Wow. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. It's with my sponsor. Before I locked Jen down with baby Ziggy, her ideal man was a rugby player with thick, dark hair.
And before he trapped me with Stockholm Syndrome, that was my dream. But look what I've ended up with, guys. Lucky me.
As a young man, I went from having a George Michael quiff to looking like Moby overnight. So I understand the depression you go through. If only they'd had manual hair service back then, which is revolutionizing hair loss treatment by combining science, tech, and medical expertise to deliver personalized, cutting-edge treatment plans. Manual has treatment options to target all stages of hair loss. 92% of men who use manuals hair plans saw improvement in their hair loss. You can receive your first treatment as little as 2 days, and most men see results in as little as 3 to 6 months. Just answer a few questions about your hair loss and medical history, and one of Manual's UK licensed experts will help you customize a plan to maximize your success and monitor your progress. More than 450,000 men trust Manual's hair loss treatment plans. Go right now to manual.co/Sean, SHAUN, to get started. And when you do, you'll get 55% off your first order. That's 55% off your first order when you get started at manual.co/Sean, manual.co/Sean for 55% off men's health the way it should be. Thank you for supporting our sponsor. The link is in the description box on YouTube. back to the podcast. Wow. So when you came to be getting released this time, how did that feel to you?
It was amazing. You can't describe the feeling. I mean, the story behind that is important, I believe. And this is for anyone out there who thinks that it's cool to go to prison, it's cool to do stupid stuff. You know, once you get a criminal record, you have a target on your back, and they categorize you as a misfit or a statistic. You're just a number, an enigma. You're nothing important. You're considered to be nothing, absolutely nothing. And in 2012, after getting released from prison that December of 2011, I I went to work for this guy. He was underworld, of course, and I was making very good money. I had an 87% success rate in collections, and I had developed a lot of trust. And so I was giving keys to his BMW 750, and I was given the territory to operate. And then my territory grew. Then it grew, and I was told to go to this business to retrieve some money. I go to the business. As soon as I walk in, the person looks at me and says, "Good morning." I said, "Good morning." And in that line of work, you can't put your hands on people. You have to communicate in a way to get them to understand that it's best to pay up, right? So this person gave me some money. It was 4% of what was owed. So, long story short,
Keep
call.
long story long, Tim. We like long stories long.
so I called my boss and I told him. He says, "Okay, tell him when." Blah blah blah. I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, you know, maybe later." So I left and I came back. They didn't have the right amount of money again, another 2%. So I said, "Okay, I'll be back." When I came back, they were they had some lady there. She had another lady there who was wearing a see-through dress, um, and a couple other ones. Another one who was looking mean like a dog, and they was giving me these Google eyes, like they wanted to bid me. You know what I mean? And it was a trick, right? And um, I said, "Listen, I'd like to know what's going on with this and this and this." And she says, "All right, just give me a few more minutes." So I come back. So I came back again. And in the meantime, I had done other things and had generated the proper amount of money. Excuse me. So when I came back, this time the door's locked. And it's like 3:30 in the afternoon. Well, the business didn't close until 5:30. And I'm looking at it, got this big window about 8 feet long, 4 foot high, you know, up and down. I'm looking at it, I'm going. And she's standing behind the counter and she's looking at me. And the woman in the see-through dress comes to the door and said, "We can't open it." I said, "Huh? What?" She goes, "It's on timer. If we open it, alarm will go off." I started laughing. I said, "All right, tell her that Mr. Such and Such would want to speak to her personally if she doesn't come to agreement about the money that's owed." And one thing went to another thing, and she just looked and smiled. I walked away, got in the vehicle, I left. Unbeknownst to me, some other stuff took place. And a week later, I rode past the business. I saw him there. I kept going. It was out of my hands. So That was on July 13th. All that happened of 2012. On August 22nd of 2012, I'm going to another place, and all of a sudden, some undercover cops jump out and start yelling, "Let me see your hands." My hands are already in plain sight, right? And they, excuse me, handcuff me, take me downtown. This cop tries to interview me. I tell him, "What are you talking about? What's the proof that I supposedly did anything?" He goes, "They say you did it." I said, "That's not evidence of a crime because someone says you've done something. There's got to be some evidence involved in it." Well, they put me in jail. Okay. So embarrassed, upset, um, confused. So made a bunch of phone calls. People were putting things together. And then one person says, "Hey, sit it out. They can't do anything about this. This is all bullcrap. Just sit it out. That way the money can be kept." I said, "All right, I'm going to tough it up. It's only be a few days." Well, all that happened on September 1st, 2012. On September 6th, all of a sudden they call into the cell and they say, "Hey, roll up. You're being released." I said, "Wow." So go downstairs. Uh, the money I had in my pocket was given to me and and on a check. I go around up the street to this place to cash it, and I did. And a ride pulls up. I get in, and people laughing and backslapping and stuff like that. And I said, "What's going on?" They go, "What they did to you was illegal." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You were never charged with a crime." I said, "Say what?" They said, "Yeah, they only had 48 hours to charge you. They didn't charge you with a crime." I said, "Then why was I being held?" He said, "You're being held illegally. They cannot hold you for 48 hours without charging you with some type of crime or an indictment." I said, "What?" And they were, "Yeah." So putting our heads together, and they said, "You were in there for 5 days with no charges." I said, "That's totally illegal." I said, "So what are we going to do?" So we got on the street and we talked to this attorney, and he was a pretty decent guy, and he's going to do all this and all that, stuff with the law. And then he started asking me questions about, so what happened? And he was like Michael Cohen guy, a fixer. And I says, "Hey man," I says, "Can we sue these people?" He said, "Just be patient. Eventually we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff." And so one thing goes to another thing. And I found out that when they came back to arrest me again on September 19th, that when I got a private investigator involved in the case to see what's going on, he said, well, he talked to someone he knew down there in the system that can fix that or that can tell him the truth. And this person says to him, as they say, well, looks like he was, how'd you say it exactly? Um, looks like they manufactured this case. I said, "What's that mean?" He goes, "Well, they put stuff in there that shouldn't have been in there." I said, "Like what?" He said, "Like this interview with the so-called victim." He said, "The detective said there's a bunch of discrepancies, and the detective's supposed to find out why there's discrepancies before he turns this over to the county attorney." And they said they gave you a county attorney specifically who is eager. I said, "Eager for what?" "Eager for convictions to make themselves look good because they have an ego." I said, "Oh." And then I go to court and I see this woman, and boy, she had eyes like a robot. I mean, they were red and they just beamed at you, and she just stared at me with this disdain. And I said, "Judge, you see this?" And he cuts his eyes and puts his head down, and She turned away at that moment. So I had a battle on my hands. And so I took her to trial. During trial, there was no evidence ever showed that anything took place. So I asked my attorney, who turned out to be a joker. I said, "Hey, man, what's the deal?" There was no videotape. There's nothing that says what this person said is true. There's no other witness besides me and this person. How is it that a crime was committed? And so he stood up to the judge and he said to Rule 20, "Hey, Your Honor, I'd like to file a motion for Rule 20. There has been no evidence shown that anything took place." Judge denied it, of course. I said, "What the?" So I go back to the jail, and the next day gave it to the jury. Right? It took them quite a long time to come back, and they came back and they said, "Well, guilty." A couple of them, few of them had their heads down, because they didn't agree with it. And you should have seen that the prosecutor's face. She was, she was so ecstatic. She was like shaking, like she was having an orgasm or something. And I mean, I'm a jarhead, a Marine, and you know my history, but I had never been that cold in my entire life. I mean, her lack of empathy was just astounding. It was just totally empty. And I'm not an angel, don't get me wrong, but right is right and wrong is wrong. And what they did was wrong. And so for the last, you know, 11 years of my life, I sat in prison for something I did not do. And I did everything that I could because I had spent so much money on attorneys and I didn't have it. And the woman who was supposed to be on my side, you know, and all she did was want cash. And naturally, like most people, when they have a relationship, they trust the person in their relationship. And I gave her an immense amount of money. And she took that money and she did whatever she wanted to with it. That's all she cared about. And um, I sat in prison and for 11 years was something I did not do. They gave me 13, but in Arizona, you do 85%. 85% of 13 is 11. And the rest of you do it on paper. So I'll be off paper this coming May or February in 26.
Because you tried to
Yeah.
appeal, didn't you?
Oh my God! I went to the state system, and they in Arizona, it's ridiculous. They all go along with the cops say. They all go along with the prosecutor says. And like I said, once you get a criminal record, people look at you with disdain. They don't care about if there's proof or not proof. And I thought I was the only one, but there's thousands of people, black, white, Hispanic, Native American, Oriental, in Arizona, you know, Jewish, Catholic, whatever, in prison for some stuff that they don't need to be in prison for. And some people become super hard inside and they start to hate. They start to look at other people with loathing. And there's those in prison, as you do know, who decide to go to the dark side completely in their heart. And they join gangs and they prove themselves to those gangs and they start doing heinous stuff in prison. Well, I thank God that I've not become hard in my heart. I know right from wrong, and looking at, um, looking back and understanding that I'm blessed. Number one, to get out healthy. Number two, with all my, you know, appendages, so to speak. I still got my eyes. I see people lose stuff in there, of course. And when I got out this time, because you asked this question, how did it feel? I said, I don't care what it is. I still got life. I'm not going to walk around and do anything that's going to get me even to be noticed. Okay. And in America, you know, there's so many people who have had contact with the police. I'm not on anybody's list. I meet people driving Uber who tell me that they have, you know, they know cousins, family members, whatever, who have been arrested, charged with crimes or whatever, and they were minor stuff. And so, like you told me the other day, it's all about money. People do this so they can get money from the government or whatever. Um, but I stepped out tall and proud, happy. Um, things are tough. Things are very tough. I've lost so much, so I have a ways to go and achieving the things that I want to achieve and to just move forward and stay focused on what's right. Um, the other day, because of the way I think, I saw this kid and he was, walking behind these other kids. He had his backpack for school, he had his head down and I could sense something was wrong with him. Of course, you can look and see it, but I sensed more than that, you know. And so, you know, 5 miles down the road, I made a couple, trips with people. I pulled into a Circle K, you know, to put some petrol gas in the vehicle. And the kid comes walking up, okay? And I look at him and I say, just look. And his clothing didn't look normal. And I said, hey, young bro. He looked at me. His eyes were just full of pain, full of shame. And I said, you all right, man? He said, no. What's wrong? He didn't say anything. And I said, how old are you? 19. I said, dude, you ain't 19. Yeah, no. I said, you look like you're 15 years old. He goes, I know. People always do say that. I said, what's wrong? And he told me what happened to him. Okay. Um, he tried to fit in with some people. And the people he tried to fit in with just wanted to use him because he was vulnerable. So they put him in a situation at a store, right? And it was a little family store, and they knew the routine that the old man in the store had. So they sent him in there to do some stuff so that he can be a distraction. And they went in behind him and they robbed the place. And they put him in a position for him to get in trouble. So the police got called. Okay. And I said, who's those people walking in front of you? He does just some of them. I said, really? He goes, yeah. I said, are you homeless? He goes, yeah. I said, you don't look at, and so this conversation went on. And when the cops came there, they threw him in the back seat. And he started crying. And the cop had enough experience to can tell that he didn't know what was going on. So they let him go. That was a decent cop. And so he says, hey, what am I supposed to do? I said, man, what you have to do, man, number one, is start to look at yourself in a better way. Start to love you. Start to focus on you in a positive way. And stop thinking that you need to fit in with people to feel good. And so what he did was, well, where do I start? So I jumped on the phone and I called this guy who runs this, halfway house facility place and asked him if he could help. He decided to help. And there's the kid there, my own dime, which I don't have much of. And he get a kid a bed, had donated clothing, found some clothes for him, fed him, got him clean, and the kid started crying out of gratitude, and that felt so damn good, helping people, that's what it's all about. It's about doing things that we know we're supposed to do, not to stand by and watch someone get crushed internally. Because when a person gets crushed internally, they're done. You know, they have no upside. They have no hope. And you have to give people hope. You know, so that's who I am. You know, because I had to take a long look at myself to realize, you know, getting out this time is just the beginning. So I got to develop things, put things in place that, you know, I can keep moving forward with the way that I believe. And, you know, I believe we'll be a success. I truly do. You know, I don't have any doubts or inhibition about what the future holds. You know, just getting out of that place and coming out here to society, and you know, things have changed. So many new buildings, so many more people. Traffic is heavier. You know, there's so much more. You know, and you have to adjust. You know, and you have to keep your mind in the right place, bro. Because when you don't have anything, you always want to think about finding a way to get what you want. You know, but I'm not. I've turned down several dark side jobs already, riding people around in Uber. People offer you things. I guess I have some type of presence because a lot of women are trying to take me home with them. I don't do it, of course. Looking for the right one. But it feels so damn good. I can't explain it. You know, there's no words. Only one word you can say is amazing. You know, when I saw your handsome face, I said, look at my boy. You know, of course, you know, I've been trying to contact you, and you know, I didn't get a response for a while. Then I looked, I said, oh, he did respond. I didn't know what to do, you know, because
Yeah,
I didn't really have time until
you
now
did.
to sit down and have a conversation.
Tim, you've had a few challenges in the Uber.
Mm-hmm.
What were those challenges with those people?
Well, the challenges were, you know, a lot of people come in the car, they're drunk and or high, or they're, you know, looking for trouble because they're sad, whatever. And you know, one challenge I had one night was two guys got in the car and they were drunk and they're carrying beer and the beers were open. I said, hey, listen, you can't get in here with open container. You can't. You just can't. I'm a contractor for Uber. I'm not, you know, a taxi service, right? I said, you know, what's going on with that? Could you please not do this? And they responded in a way that was not polite and unhealthy. And it led to a confrontation when I asked him to get out. The guy didn't want to get out. So I got out of the car, walked to the side. I said, get your ass out of the car, man. And he gets to reach his hands like he's going to grab me. And I yanked him out and threw him. You know, just grabbed his clothing and just tossed him. And he rolled on the dirt, the pavement, gets up, and he wants to act like he wants to, you know, have a little battle. And that was a mistake for him. So I hit him in his neck, and his buddy came, and I harmed him as well. And because they came at me, and so I talked about it to a couple different guys, and who were older and wiser than myself, and they said, well, if you put yourself in a position for something to happen, it happened. I said, how could I help that? And they said, no, we ain't talking about you putting yourself in a position, those two idiots. I said, that's true. All right. And because it doesn't feel good, you have to do certain things like that. It really doesn't feel good.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. It's a word from my sponsor, Shopify. When I started this podcast, there were a lot of things I had to figure out on my own. Algorithms, guest booking, marketing. I was a bit naive about what was involved, and as you get deeper into it, it starts to overwhelm your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started, such as my co-host Ron's Pokemon business. Get started with your own design studio of hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/Sean, SHAUN. Go to shopify.co.uk/Sean, shopify.co.uk/Sean. Link in the description if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for supporting our sponsor. Back to the podcast.
And, you know, there's people, I don't know how it is in England, but what I see on TV, but I know people drink a lot over there. Okay. And maybe they hold their liquor better because it's part of the culture to drink ale and beer, stuff like that. Here in America, you know, spirits, alcohol and stuff like that, liquor has been regulated and most people can't deal with it. But there's always those who are going through something and they're thinking getting drunk or getting high is going to help them. And that evening, those two jokers, because that's what they were, all they do is say, okay, man, we respect that. Put the open containers in the trash can, get in the daggone car and go back to business. That's all you had to do. Okay. But they didn't want to. All right. Because they had a little bit of size and the testosterone is just flowing. And they're angry at what? I don't know. But the facility where they were at, you know, which was a bar, a club, whatever, was telling them to leave as well. So that's what happened. Other experiences I've had with Uber, I've had people get in the car and try to have sex in the back seat. I've had several women expose themselves to me, ask me to come home with them. Some were drunk and some weren't. I've had people ask questions about my history and then say to me, I'll give you this and this and that if you do this, this and that. I've had people get in the car, a man and woman, start throwing punches at one another. Yeah. I've had people ask me a question about politics, and if I didn't respond correctly to them, they got pissed off. I mean, seriously. Seriously. This one guy was a huge Trump supporter, and the conversation started immediately about politics. And so for 15 minutes, I listened to this guy. I kept trying to say something. He kept interrupting me. And finally, I said to him, I said, sir, I understand what you're saying, but I don't want to talk about politics. And he says, what do you mean? I said, well, there's two things you don't talk about, politics and religion. He goes, why? I said, because it always leads to bullcrap. It always does. I said, you ain't going to like my response. Well, why won't I like it? I said, I don't think the same way you do. And I said, that's what makes America what it is. We have the right to have different opinions. And my suggestion for us is just have this ride, which is a 32-minute ride, and just to be talk about football, baseball, basketball, fishing, hunting, whatever, history. I love history. What do you know about the Civil War? You know, I haven't brought up the Vikings. What do you know about Ragnar? You know, all these Vikings. And he sat there with his look. He was mad. I mean, mad. And he said, well, Donald Trump's the greatest president ever in history. I said, okay. And he said this comment, he's better than Obama. I said, okay. All right. And that was good enough for this clown. I mean, man, he was heated, man.
Tim, you told me a story the other day of a man who called you the N-word. What happened
Yeah.
to him?
Wow. Well,
How did that come about? What was the backstory?
well, I'm thinking about how many times people have gotten mad and called me the N-word. I mean, that's it seems to be a common phenomenon with most people, who don't get their way, who are angry or whatever. But anyways, with all due respect, I love you. Ask me a different question.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Okay, so all of the photos that I put out of you on all the different platforms, the one where you're in the backyard with the weights,
Yeah.
all the people are asking, well, what was he in for? Yeah, he served all these decades, but what was he in for? Is it drugs? Is it gangs? They kind of want to know what generally you were in and out of prison for.
Well, most of the time it was the gangster lifestyle. It was a thinking that
Just to go back a bit more, you came out of the Marines and became a
yeah.
bodyguard, right?
I became security specialist. Yes.
And that led to the gangster lifestyle.
Yes, it was gangster lifestyle.
And
It
then in the
was.
gangster lifestyle, you got the white powder, and people, are
Well,
taking.
I first I started with doing, like I said, the personal security thing, and then I graduated. You could speak to doing security detail. Okay. For example, you drive from point A to point E, and you don't know what's being transported in the vehicle, or the person you're transporting, you don't know them, and your job is just security. And you get, say, $10,000 for a trip from Phoenix to Tucson, or Phoenix to Sedona, whatever. And in some cases, just across town, and you get half up front, other half when you finish. Um, that was lucrative. And the adrenaline rush was so intense. That's just what you wanted. You wanted that adrenaline rush. You had the same kind of adrenaline rush when you were, serving, and you wanted to um, have that feeling all the time. So you got into things that you know led to that, adrenaline rush, man. And the adrenaline rush was intense. It was intense. And so you need drugs for that adrenaline rush. It's like when you were being a broker, you know, how it felt to make and do what you did for some stuff that you loved. You love to work, you love the job you're doing now, and it makes you feel good. And adrenaline makes you feel good. Okay, and that's what it was. So it wasn't so much of being criminally minded. It was for a lot of people. I'm not talking about just for myself. For a lot of people, they do things to get a rush. Okay, and I'm not talking just criminal things as well either. I met a guy the other day. He works for UPS, and when he's not working, he was out drinking, and so he called Uber, so he didn't get in trouble. And he's telling me all about how he likes to drive an ATV down this dirt road, and it has hills on it. Okay, and you go, it's on the other side, and you come down the other side, and all of a sudden it could be a bull or something, a car right there. He said several times he's come up a hill, and he was fortunate that they were further away from him so he could slam on the brakes or swerve around it or whatever. I said, that's kind of dangerous. He goes, yeah. There was such a rush though, man. So people do a lot of different things to get a rush. What I chose to do was wrong. I'm not going to, I can't say it was. You know, uh, I wanted that rush. I wanted the rush you know, of danger. When you had to protect someone from one point, you're also on edge. You're looking around. You're feeling, you're sensing the area, and the vibe and the air. You're trying to find, you know, you know, areas of egress and areas of defense, and it's a thought process that you learn in the service, and then you transfer it to society. And so I kept going over the years because the adrenaline was intense. It was intense, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the adrenaline. Now I do other things to get adrenaline. Since I've been in prison this last time, helping people gives you a good rush. It feels good. It feels so good to help people. It really does.
Tim, what was the biggest adrenaline rush you ever had in your entire life?
The biggest one, watching a child being born.
Yeah, that's something else, isn't it?
Yes, it was amazing. And the second one was, well, I can't talk about the second one. You understand why? The third one, the third most intense moment of my existence. I've been working all night. I was going down the road. It's early in the morning. Traffic is very light in this area. And I was going up a hill. And the sun came up. And the sun hit the green, the brown grass and the trees. It was amazing to see that. The colors and the beauty. And so that was a super intense adrenaline rush. It took your breath away. It was so pretty. Yeah. Yeah. That was cool. I've had quite a few that in bad situations, of course, a shock of a rush, then your training kicks in instantly, and you respond by doing certain things, and you throw up your weapon or whatever, and you get busy. Uh, it was some intense moments. The adrenaline hit in those moments. And like I said, then you come back to you know reality of society, and you say to yourself, you say, "Hey, I'm going to um, you know do this just to get that feeling." You know, to some people, it might not make sense, but to a guy who climbs a face cliff, he's hanging there by his fingernails. You know, the adrenaline rush must be super intense for that person. And that's what it is for me.
Do you remember the day we met?
Of course, I do.
Do you remember the conversation?
Uh, it was pretty good. I remember your laughter as I was telling you stories. Yes,
You
I
came to
remember.
my door. You came to my
Right.
door, and it's like you're so big, like the sunlight was completely blocked out. I turn around, I'm like, whoa. And then you
We
started
met.
asking me about
Wait a
history.
minute.
You
Right.
started asking me about British
English.
history.
Right. That shocked you. You
Yeah.
said, "Yeah." I remember looking at you. You went, "This guy's got some intelligence." But we were
Uh,
in the chow hall, the kitchen, and that tall kid was picking at you, pushing you against the wall. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, push on me." And he went and sat down. And you said you and I had a brief interchange. And you said, "Go ahead." No, you go ahead, man. We're in line. And I said, "No, you go ahead, bro," because you had a diet and I had a diet. And so we had to wait until they called our names to get our food. And we were standing there, and I think we had dinner together that night, sitting down talking. And you told me,
yeah.
come on over. And I went over later, and you had a bag of potato chips. And here, I got some chips. I said, yeah, they're plain potato chips. I said, how do you get so fit, man? You don't eat anything. And you start talking about your diet. You're a vegetarian at the time, and you did not want to eat meat, especially the meat in prison. And you said, well, I took a piece of meat out of a sandwich once, and I threw it up against the fence. And you said, it's still hanging there. The birds wouldn't even eat it. You know, it was a piece of stiff crap hanging up in the wazer wire. I remember that. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember those. I remember those guys who were sweating people because there was a guy who, the big guy, he thought he was a biker out of California, and he
yeah,
was making the young kid give him blowjobs in the
yes,
library.
yes,
Yeah, that's the guy. And then that guy ended up. He looked like a train had hit him. He looked like a train had hit him in the end.
yeah. Called him Brian was his name. I remember. Well, yeah, I gave O'Brien a 1-2. You know,
My cellmate was there. He saw it. Long Island.
yeah, yeah,
He said there was three guys in the cell. You stepped in. He said, "Who's called me a snitch?" Because the guy was trying to start a rumor,
right.
and you just went bam, bam. And he said his head hit the toilet so hard, all
Hmm.
the water came out the toilet.
Well, he exaggerated. He exaggerated. No, the guy was a turd, man. This dude had that little boy and the kid. No, the kid's name was Brian. He had making him give him blowjobs. The kid was
Yeah,
mentally freaking disturbed. He was taking medication because he was mentally disturbed, and he was SMI. The kid Brian, and this dude had manipulated this kid to make him pay him $75 a week in store, something like that, and he made the kid give him blowjobs. So I had him on my radar for the whole time. You know, he was always on my radar. And the kid was so lost. You know, he didn't know what to do. And there's so many scumbags around that none of them did anything to help the kid. None of them. So I says, I told him, I said, hey, you need to stop that. And he said, why? I said, because somebody's going to step up to you one of these days and make you suck their dick. And so, and he got mad. And so a lot of guys who are cowards, they make up stories for other people to get the attention away from themselves. So he told two people that he thought was going to run around and say something bad about me. And one of the guys ran to me, hey, Tim, such and such said that you were a snitch. I said, what? And getting a snitch jacket ain't cool. And so I looked for him and they said, he's up there. Went up there. I knocked on the door, just walked in. I said, who's the person saying I'm a snitch? And they all looked at him. You call me a snitch? He stood up, yeah. And that was it.
just like that.
Stop that rumor.
Yeah, totally.
It stopped.
And I just,
It
and
did.
that's a good story because it's one thing for me to say, you've told me you've helped young people who are up against predators, but it's another thing for the viewers to hear this story where I was there and witnessed you personally risking your life for people
Mm,
you barely even knew, man. I mean,
yeah.
when I was writing a lot of your stories down, there were situations where, back in the day, they had river rocks in socks, they had
Yeah.
shanks, and
Yeah.
some of these predators could fight. You were telling me,
Let me
you
tell you something, man. There's this one dude, the monkey.
the
That
monkey
that
story, the
that
monkey.
guy was amazing. I mean, physically, you would not believe. We were in a pod, in an open pod. The guard tower thing was up here, you know, the room where the cops are at. and there was 4 cops in there, right? And they're making wagers, right? And everybody in that pod came out. All the blacks, the Hispanics, the whites, Native Americans, and they all stood out looking on the top tier and on the bottom tier. And they watched. Monkey had,
Tim, what was the lead up to that?
that's what I'm trying to say. The monkey had taken this one boy and put him in the monkey hole. He put the kid in the monkey hole because the kid had a little fight in him, right? He was a good looking young kid. And he didn't have much time, but he was so mouthy and arrogant that they put him in prison. So, and his parents had money. Okay. I think his dad was a doctor and his mother was a high school principal, whatever. And so, Monkey was always watching him. And I see Monkey looking at him, and so um, there's moments on the yard, as you know, that everything is mellow and nobody is really watching or paying attention because it's a sense in the air that everything's good. And a lot of predators, they wait for those moments. And so this guy jumps out and he grabs a kid that evening and pulled him behind some dumpsters. This is what I remember. And it might have been another. He did more things to the kid than that, but he took the kid and choked him within an inch. You know what that means? And so the kid was terrified. He was shocked. He never experienced anything like that. And so then he gets the kid in the cell and um, he rapes him, simply put. And the kid, um, what a psychological attack. If you look at that, you know, you stare at somebody and the person feels you staring at them and then they become intimidated by your power, in that environment. And then you know, you hide in the shadows and you act nonchalant. And when the kid comes in striking distance, because you know the person's routine, you jump out and you grab them and you take them into a dark spot. You know, even though there's some lighting, but it isn't enough lighting to make people notice. And he behind the dumpsters, um, I forget the kitchen number, but um, you were there, and there's dumpsters, and behind those dumpsters, no one can see, and so the kid goes by innocently, chokes him within an inch, terrifies him, and then says, "Won't talk to him," gets him in the cell, and he brutalized the kid so viciously, so freaking viciously, that the kid bled for days, man. Yeah, yeah, that's some sick, terrible shit. Excuse my language. It tore my heart out of my chest. I couldn't just sit by. So I challenged his ass, and I got some good licks on old Monkey. But Monkey had some resilience.
Yeah,
She was,
he had a
he,
unique fight. He had a unique fighting
oh
style,
my
didn't he?
God, man. He, he would roll on the ground here and roll on the ground there, and he'd pop up and he'd bounce around. And I said, oh my God, he was strong. I must have had 50 pounds on him, 60, 70 pounds. He was strong. I mean, freaking strong. I watch him do pull-ups and he do 25 pull-ups a set, sometimes go 30, 35. He'd do thousands of push-ups, you know, and he'd run and he had, six pack for his abs. He was a well-built guy and it wasn't fake. It wasn't all show. I've never seen him do any type of training outside of that to keep his fighting skills honed, but he didn't need to. The monkey kicked my ass. Yes, he did. That monkey kicked my ass. But
what strikes did he get you with? Do you remember?
well, some he kicked me a couple times. He hit me in my body, hit me upside the head once or twice. One got me in my left eye. I know that. He demolished old T-Bone. He demolished me. Yes, he did. He kicked my ass. Yes, he did. The monkey. But I did hurt the monkey, and I didn't know it at first. So, Gimli was stuck to him. Anyways, I was telling Kirsten something. Sorry. Anyway, and it woke him up to who kind of person he truly is, and he stopped doing it. To that kid, anyways. When I was around, he didn't do it anymore. At least I didn't hear of it. And that was a battle. Let me tell you something. I don't know. I'm trying to think back how long it lasted. It was in the middle of the pod, and you go into a zone, so you don't know if anybody else around you. All you're doing is doing what you're doing. And when you're doing what you're doing in those type of environments, people are sizing you up. It's like when England and the United States go to Afghanistan, the Russians and Chinese and Iranians and any country that has anything against us, they're watching our techniques in battle. Okay. And they're sizing us up. It's the same principle when you're one-on-one and a bunch of guys in that environment watching. People were sizing me up, and I didn't realize at the moment they were, because I was too busy trying to defend myself, because I had let the monkey know I was coming. And I thought I was going to get him, but that monkey kicked my ass. His fighting style was super freaking. He'd bounce around, down, squat down. He'd bounce, then he'd roll. He rolled into me one time, and I'm hitting him in his back. And I'm not hurting him when I'm hitting him in his back. So I started clubbing him, monkey style. But when he got me down, he clubbed me a couple times. Boom, boom. And thank God he didn't scratch my eyes like a real monkey. He didn't bite me. Thank God he didn't. But I got kicked. I got punched. I got elbowed. All I know is that when I walked away, I was a mess. And the monkey, bounced away to his I didn't forget it. He did a roll and another roll. And then he, like a monkey went into a cell. This is a man. And he went into a cell. And his cellie put his head down and came in, walked in behind him. It's amazing. His cellie and people were like, they're watching, with intensity because they size you up. Really do. But you'll be amazed how many people in certain environments, who look for opportunities to have a sexual encounter with another man. Some people think that homosexual people are usually weak and timid. This isn't the truth, you know. Uh, um, there's people, men and women out there who have some astounding abilities, and some people try to categorize them because of their sexual preference. It doesn't matter if you're who you are, and don't. And I tell you, and because you're my brother, I love you, and you know that I'll do anything for you and your family. You know, um, you don't do stuff. You just don't do stuff to harm. You know, But there's people out there who know how to do what they do. And you might think because they're a lesbian or homosexual that they're nothing. Do not be mistaken. And old Monkey was full fledged. He had no, qualms about being who he was. He was comfortable with it. Very comfortable with it.
Did you ever cross paths with him again?
Yeah, and he nodded. I nodded, and there was no confrontation. It was respect. A lot of it, and there's one thing I never told you, but you make enemies with certain people when you step up, and that's why a lot of people. There probably thousands of men and women who want to help other people, but they're probably afraid because some of those people have friends, and they don't want to deal with the situation. And in a prison environment, so many people are, scared to stand up because they might have to deal with more than one person. And I can respect that, but um, the monkey told these guys who planned on jumping me, if they jump me, they have to jump him too. You ever seen Shawshank Redemption?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And this group of men, they call it Three Sisters. And
I
they
could be a friend to you.
And do you remember the Three Sisters? How they was always trying to catch that guy so they could rape him.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like. That's exactly what it's like. So they said they were going to punk me. They were going to catch me. They were going to knock me out, and they were going to sexually brutalize me. And there were some big boys, and they were fit. Okay, and they walked around looking for victims. And this is what the sad thing about it is. As you know and I know, the cops know a lot of stuff is going on like that. And they know a lot of stuff is going on in prison, the drugs, whatever, the extortions, whatever. And they always can't do anything about it. Okay. And, word came to me that was going to happen. But the monkey told them, because he was a homosexual, if they mess with him, they have to mess with me. Mess with me, they have to mess with him. And they stopped. But when I looked at them, my pride was assaulted. So we went to being transferred to another yard, and one of the guys that was part of that little group, they call themselves the Mansters, the Mansters, and I talked to the dude. I said, "Hey man, what's up with all that?" And he let me know why. He said, "Well, we didn't want you around because we like doing what we do." And there's a reason why, because they were doing time. And he said that he was heterosexual before he came to prison. And I said, dude, having an orgasm isn't that serious, man. It's not that important unless you're in love with somebody, don't you think? I mean, the rest of it was just blank. He goes, oh, no, you don't have to be in love to have an orgasm. No, I guess you don't. But if you do, it's got to be with a person you respect and want to be with and wants to be with you. And he's, I'm going to use that psychology on me. It feels good to take it. And everybody on the bus heard him say it, right? And there's two cops are riding those transport buses, as you know. And the one cop looks back and he watched them the whole ride. The whole ride. The cop watched this dude. And when we got where we got, Cop goes. He mentioned to other cops, I guess, what took place, conversation, and all of a sudden, vehicles start pulling up, cops start running up, and all I know, they took him someplace. We heard some noises. And that was it. I was like, whoa. Okay. Because it's wrong. It's just plain everyday wrong. I'm not an angel. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes in my thinking every single day. Sometimes in person, I make mistakes. But you don't walk around thinking it's cool to sexually assault somebody just because you're uh, more mentally fit or so-called mentally fit or stronger than that person. You know, and in prison, there's a lot of guys doing life, and so you know, female cops got to watch out. You know, you remember that situation? Those guys that one dude decided to grab that female officer, take her in the cell, and rape her. And
Was that the one that ended up in the longest hostage situation? Was it that one, or was it a different one?
It was a different one.
Oh,
It was
it was just one female guard.
and one guy.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. How long did that
Okay.
go on for? What was the backstory on that?
Well, the guy was horny. She was young and gullible, and she was always over talkative to certain people, and because she didn't feel a threat, and she was inexperienced in life, and he took her kindness as weakness, because some people believe that they can just do whatever they want to a woman. Some people believe that. Some people have a total patriarchal way of thinking that men are more superior, and a woman's nothing but something to be used or abused. And he snatched her in a cell and and barricaded his door some kind of way, and they got food. They transferred him to a prison in Maine, of all places. He was already doing 40 something years, I guess. Probably gave another 100 past that. But he had resigned himself to do that because he knew he had no freedom. He had no freedom. So that's why he did what he did.
Would you say out of all the people that you fought in prison then, that Monkey was the hardest challenge, the closest? Was there ever a
There's a guy.
situation where... Yeah, go on.
What were you going to say?
No, please go. Please go, yeah.
There's a guy, big, and very, very, very strong. I mean, unnatural strength. And he picked up, they had these crates of milk, okay? And going to test his strength. So I pick up 7 and I keep them balanced. And I walked into the walk-in freezer. He picked up 14, kept them balanced, leaned down to get them under the door, and got inside there. And the whole time just leaning, and then he put it, sat him down, and didn't spill one. It takes some immense strength, core strength, mental strength to do that. And he was he used to knock guys out and then suck their dick. True story. Um, he's passed away now. His name was Rock White, and nobody messed with that fool. Nobody messed with the fool. That confrontation was. That's how I know there's a God. That's how I know there is a God. He could have did whatever he wanted to me.
Why
But
did it get to the point of a confrontation like that?
Well, because I confronted him and I told him, you know, stop messing with some of them little white boys before he starts a race riot. He said, I want to stick my tongue down his throat. I said, what? So I punched him. Man, he came at me with a 1-2. It's like a damn mule kicking you. And if a mule kicks you, you'd probably die if it gets you flush. Boom, boom. I remember being in the daze. And I remember him walking away. And I don't know how long I stood there. People saying I was knocked out on my feet. I stood there. Yeah. And I'm not no pushover. Still now today, I'm not a pushover. So I came back at him, same place, same result. You know, I tried 4 times. The third time he stood there watching because he knew I was coming. And it just did that. Bam. Caught him. He ate it like it was candy. Just tucked the punch like it was nothing. And I hit very hard. And he demolished me with 2 punches. Yeah. One here and one here. I mean, the first one was right here. Oh, oh, boom. I was like standing there. The wall helped me. All if I think about it, the wall hit the wall, and then I stopped. And each time the freaking cop, he sat me down in a chair, and they took ice cold rags or towels, put it around my head, my neck. Some put it on my body, and that brought me back. But was I sore? Oh my God. Soreness lasted. But I didn't let it break me mentally. Some people get broke mentally because of the power. Finally, um, they transferred him. Thank God, because he was tough. He was very very tough. His name was Rock White. Some people have natural strength. They just have it. Him and the monkey. There's a big white boy that was, and you know how the white boys are. I mean, the white boys treat their people in prison wrong. You know this, and they they this boy here. He'd walk up to this white boy, wow, just smack the shit out of him, you know. And they were super scared of him. And he'd walk around, point at people, and some of the dudes became gay because of it, And I said probably had gay tendencies within their system in the first place. Why they decided to, you know, get into it. I asked one guy why. He said they didn't want him to hurt him. I said, okay, I understand that. So that was the end of that. And I got him. I got him with a lucky punch. I hit him right here. It was a lucky punch. And it stunned him enough. I used my elbows and my knees and I put him down. And it was a code that you live by. Once you get your ass kicked, you're down, you're down. And if you come inside with a knife, then it's a battle to death. But excuse me, if you don't come with a knife, then people are just going to accept it and allow you to do what you do. And they oh, damn fly, and they you just go through the system with um, eyes on the back of your head, so to speak. And big white boy, he was strong, very 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 strong. I wonder if him and Rock White can fight Lennox Lewis.
So, Tim, I think the viewers are probably interested to know, like, how prison changed over the years. Like, what
Wow.
year did you first go in?
Ugh, that was a hard question, Sean. Um, My first prison encounter was uh, in the 80s, not long after I got out of the Corps. Um, I went to prison, and as the years went by, people became more sophisticated in their approaches to doing time. People became more um, ruthless. It wasn't like in the old days, somebody wanted your demise, they would walk up and just do it. Nowadays, it's systematic. People do things like the old English used to. You know, I think his name was, he was fighting the Scottish. He fought against William Wallace. I forgot his name. He was a king of England. They call him Longshank. Longshank was a very intelligent man. He knew that he had to have certain people in certain places so that England could be safe, from um, the French or the Normans and from the Scottish. Those were the two main factions at the time. So he would systematically, um, in time, he would send stuff to certain Scottish noblemen, from my recollection, and he would poison them, poison their minds. Okay, and that way he can see to their demise without him actually having to do it. And that's how people in prison are. Today they do things to systematically undermine you as a person, or the- you know, or the administration does it the same thing. Okay, let's put
Have you
this
got
guy
a
in position.
story? Have you got a story as an example of that?
Do you have a story, or we want me to tell a
As an
story?
Yeah, do you have a story to give a
Yes,
demonstration of what you
I have a
said?
story. I have a story of that. There's this guy. I'm not going to say his name because he's still walking and talking. He he was a very powerful individual. He was a white guy, okay, and he had his family had money, or has money, and he could he could fight, and he showed no fear. Okay, no matter what came against him, he showed no fear, and fear plays a major part in prison, as you know. Um, so they sent 5 guys against him, and he hurt 3 of them pretty good, but he still got done up because there's 5 against 1 in a closed environment. And so, but he gained his respect. And so one day he decides to go get the other 2 he couldn't handle at the time. And he put a big rock, smooth river rock, in a sock, 2 socks. And he walked up to this guy, bang, behind the head. When the guy fell, he bang, bang, twice in his face. And then he had paid some other guy, ain't gonna say what race or color he was, to take it, right? And that guy passed it on, and then pretty soon it's gone, and the socks were put in a place where they buried it under the dirt. Okay, and so the cops never saw, you know, a weapon. Okay, so after time goes by, um, the group that he was against him. They attacked him by saying things, put certain people close to him, and they went to the administration, and they got the administration to help him. And it was pretty sophisticated. It was the old English technique, okay, of cloak and daggers, right? And eventually, the people, you know, started to believe the stories. They started to accept um, the things that they were saying about him. And one day, he walked out in the rec yard, without the rest of the white boys. And he didn't think anything was going to happen to him. And so some other people walked up to him and they stabbed him because they used those techniques to put his life in jeopardy. And it worked. It worked. And they didn't kill him, but he went to the hospital. And after he got to the hospital, he had lost 40 something pounds. And he was a shell of himself. And so he was walking around with, tubes in his nose. And he still is today. Last time I saw him. Because they don't use the brutal technique of walking up, because a lot of people don't want to do time. They want to be able to get out and go back to whatever they were doing. And it's ruthless. It's the same thing Russia does today, or the United States or England. They don't have to send a missile unless they really want to send a message, But so they use cloak and daggers, some sophisticated techniques to see to someone else's demise. They planted drugs on people, and then the administration comes. Someone tells them, "Hey, this guy's got drugs," and they go there. He's got eight grams of heroin. 8 grams. That's a lot, and it's a big charge in prison. Um, or they would systematically let him use somebody else's phone, and then his phone numbers are in the phone, and they'd plant the phone with drugs and a shank, and then they would go get the cops, and let the cops take care of the problem they have. And that's some of the techniques people use today, to deal with you or to alleviate you, for lack of better words. Yesteryear, it wasn't that way, of course. People would walk up to you, and sometimes you go to a private corner and you do it out, like a duel. Walk 10 paces and turn around. But today, no, it's ruthless. It really is. It's ruthless. And instead of just stabbing you, they would take their shank and roll it in feces and let it dry, and then they come up and just see you working out, and they scrape it across your back or scrape it across your leg. There's certain parts of the body that would take certain wounds better, or there's certain parts of the body that would get infected faster. You know what I mean? And there's one guy they went after, they took a razor blade and they put it in feces, and then they along his inner thigh, and his inner thigh opened up, man, went, and I was about 40 feet away from it, and I looked over there and seen the guy's thigh go, just open up, and just, and it kept, he was screaming and yelling, and no one knew what to do. So I said, "Hey, tie it off, make sure there's no femoral artery." His femoral artery wasn't hit. And there's another guy who was an army medic. He and I grabbed the dude, held him down, and we tied it off, but it was still oozing blood because all the little blood vessels that were hit, and they cut him, it went just opened. It was just crazy looking, and he got an infection, very serious. And last time I heard, it was that he did die. I wasn't there to see it, but I went to the hospital. He was gone for, just gone. And we asked questions, to the cops, and sometimes they give information, sometimes they won't. But there's one cop said he died. That's some of the stuff that goes on. Ruthless. I mean, brutally cold. I mean, and you know what it's over? It was over postage stamps. Do you hear me, brother? Postage stamps.
Wow.
I mean, I know that's crazy. That's so sickening. Why would you want to do something like that over postage stamps? What kind of thinking do you have? And that's what takes place. People do things like if they know you have an old lady and what they call down, she's down, she'll come to prison and she'll bring things for you, whatever, and you're not part of the organization that they are, they'll systematically attack her on the street. They'll go after her and they'll tell her things and make her convince things. And um, next thing you know, she's sending you Dear John letters. And I've seen people hang themselves over that. I've seen people, run, jump over the top tier. That the top tier is like, and do a swan dive right into the pavement. I mean, they actually pumping in the air, you know, because they got crushed inside. And then the people that were behind it, they're looking, acting like nothing happened. And you look at their face and you can see they're guilty. Um, there's one Mexican kid, he was losing it. So he was walking in line. All of a sudden, he jumped out of line. He ran and he started kicking the gate to get out the gate. Okay. And then he started climbing the fence. Right. And the fence is razor wire up there, cantina wire. Some very serious stuff. Right. And he went up that fence and he started grabbing it. Yeah. He's cutting himself up purposely. Blood squirting everywhere. Everywhere. The coyotes, I don't know how they get inside those inner fences, but the coyotes at night were licking it. Like 7 coyotes. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, people are, they become more, you know, um, just harder inside, more colder. Their hearts have become just, a block of ice, no empathy, no compassion, no care. They'll sit there and look you in the face. And the whole time they're just thinking to themselves how they could do something to you, and that's a lot of people like that in there, a lot. And some of them don't have heinous crimes, some do. So what I did was simply, you know, I worked out. I worked out with certain people. If you weren't part of that circle, you couldn't come close to us. Um, you're always on your guard, always. You know what I mean? 98% of the time, I would tell cops, "Hey, I request a search whenever I left the room. Before I left the room, and the cop would do a quick search. He said, "Nothing's in here." I said, "Videotape it." He would go get a videotape. He'd videotape it because people plant stuff all the time. Yeah. So you gotta have your focus. You gotta have discipline of mind to have a routine, a set routine, and don't deviate to doing other things, even though it might be boring. But you have to watch your 6. You might think somebody's close to you, even when you work out with them, they won't watch your 6. Man, I've seen the people get paid $2,000 cash just to turn their back on their homeboy, on a guy part of their own crew. Somebody walk up to him, hit him with a pow, certain object, try to crush their skull. That's prison.
So, Tim, when you first came in then in the 1980s, what were the biggest challenges you faced?
Um,
Was it the county jail first?
your county jail was nothing compared to prison. Um, you go in the shower and you handle your business. There were no shanks. Um, unless a cop brought one in for you. So there were a few times I had to go in the shower with people, you know, and get to fight. But you got to prison. Oh my God.
Was it mostly Florence prison back then?
Yeah, it's Florence, and people were, there was always gangs, black gang, Mexican gangs, white gangs. You know, there was always, you can't walk certain places. You got watch out. That's this territory. Or watch out. That's that territory. And then there were cops like this one cop. His nickname was Bionic Ear, and there's another called Silver Fox. And they were very, very, very good at what they did. They could look at you and see if you were dirty. Now, not high, then you were carrying something. And they would attack. They would rightly attack. I see them grab people by the neck, just grab the Adam's apple, kill. And no one fought back. No one fought back. Because if you did, they'll beat your ass and then you get charged. So I remember the biggest challenge I faced was having to prove myself physically. At first, physically, believe it or not, then mentally. And once I established myself physically, the attacks came mentally. Yeah. Some places was vice versa, but those are the biggest challenges you first go in those places. You know, um, they fed you 3 meals a day, so you didn't have to worry about that aspect of it all. But as far as soap and water, deodorant, things like that, you have to ask your people to bring it to you or put money in your books so you could buy it for yourself. It was rough. Put it mildly, it was rough. Very, very, very rough. You know, um, there was a birthday party here yesterday, and the balloons just popped. Anyways, so I there's a guy named Tommy Fair. He was a black guy. He was 6'6", about 200 pounds. He was physically fit. He had a Greek statue six pack. You know what I mean? All his muscles were defined throughout his whole body. And he was slim, good shape, worked out all the time, ate certain things, ran about 8 miles a day. We were playing basketball, and I was a pretty good basketball player. I played ball in high school and stuff like that, and had scholarship offers. And I went at him on the basketball court, and I dunked the basketball. Well, he didn't like it, and so he started to attack me mentally with all kinds of bullshit. And so one day I said, "Hey man, what's your issue?" And I said the word issue. I was a newbie, I was green, and you ain't supposed to say the word issue. Right? I said, what's your issue? And that's calling him out. And when we went to chow, he threw a rock, hit me. I look over there, called me in the corner. He had long arms, long legs. He was physically, he could handle himself. But one lucky punch, I got him. And I fought that dude every day for 8 weeks. Every single day, me and him fought. Yep, it was brutal. It was it was a brutal existence, to say the least. With the um, amount of deception. Everybody was always on edge. It was always about who was slicker, who was sneakier, who was more devious. And if you don't guard yourself, you become the same way. Okay. And so, like I said, I would hang out with people who thought differently, and we would work out together, play ball together. When I was with you, on that 1 yard, there was no one I really wanted to hang out with. You know, I would find some people to work out with, and that wasn't even steady. You know, some of those guys couldn't work out. Um, I played basketball and softball, as you know, while you were running. God, boy, you could run. My God, you were like a freaking deer.
In the
You
rain
could
as well.
run.
I love running in the monsoon rain. That was fun.
Jesus. I look at
Yeah.
you and say, man, when I was in the Marine Corps, I ran so much, so many
Mm.
push-ups, so many jumping jacks. I said, I ain't running no more, because the running is taxing on your joints. It really is.
Mhm.
But anyway, so I the most difficult challenges that you face was dealing with cops. Cause they could be, oh my God. They had no honor. They had no integrity. They did not want to face the truth, the cops. You know, I watched a cop get paid $1,500 once, right? My own two eyes. And he took the money, he put it down his crotch, and he walked out. Well, 20 minutes later, here comes these four guys, and they had towels around their faces, beanie caps, and they rushed this kid. And the kid gave up. He didn't fight back. And they turned him over and they pulled his pants down and they shoved the broomstick up his ass. I sat there, I didn't show any emotion. I sat there and looked like everybody else, you know. And the kid, and I didn't ask why, but word went around the yard that he sat in the wrong chair. That's it. That's it. He sat in the wrong chair. That's how people think, brother. And the administration, they were always trying to get you. They were always trying to put you in a position where either you helped them or you're against them. And so you had to make a side. I made a side to be against them, of course. You know, I didn't help them with any issues. When I started helping people who were being molested and stuff like that, that was my decision, right? The administration, they never came to me. I got put in a hole a few times. They put me in this one hole for a week. In a week's time, I only had two meals. One was bacon and eggs, was pretty good. Other was chicken, it was pretty good. Right? Then I didn't get nothing else. And I was drinking water from the sink. Oh my God. Ooh. You know, and they wanted me to bang on the door and stuff like that to request my food. I didn't. I just laid on the bed. Then they come to the door. I'm doing push-ups and jumping jacks. Um, that's it. That was it. You know, that's what took place. They were this one guy, his name was Tillman. Tillman was a beast. I couldn't handle Tillman. No one could handle Tillman. And Tillman would walk around the yard, black kids, Mexican kids, white kids. Pow! He'd knock them out. He'd drag them in his cell and he'd suck their dicks. So he did it so many times that the warden came with a welding team and cops would rush shotguns and they welded his door shut. They welded him in the cell. They didn't put him in a hole because they know somebody probably get hurt. So they welded him in the cell after they drugged him. He woke up, he couldn't get out. And they fed him all his meals and stuff like that. Told me to take a bath or wash out of the sink. That's how it is. You have to be, you know, So you got to be careful. You got to be you have to keep your eyes open for opportunities to you know, avoid situations. You bend a corner, you never know what you'll see. Wow, man. I've seen some stuff. I've seen some stuff. I bent the corner once, and this female officer, you know, there was four guys standing in front, right, facing out, and this one guy was on the ground on a blanket, missionary position, giving it to her. I'm looking at him. You can see. And I said, look at him. I said, oh, God. I ain't see nothing. Don't know nothing. But she walked around. You know, After a while, she had her head down out of shame. But after a while, she picked the head back up. And I found out that he paid $2,000 for her. $2,000 just to have a sexual encounter. No, no. But that's what he did. And she, I don't know how many times she did it. None of my business. She wasn't being raped. She was prostituting herself. There's people there that got a lot of money. Some people, a lot of money. So, you know, you might be in the corner and see two cops back there fighting. Yeah. Might be in the corner and you look up, see the gun tower, and two guys in there having to dueling it out, and the cops are betting on them. Who's going to win? Yeah, man. It's serious. It's serious. Some places, they got little areas, and two shanks are put in there. It's a black guy and a Mexican guy fighting to the death. I'm not lying. I'm not making it up. They had it on ABC 2020 when these cops was betting on these guys fighting, and when one guy get the best, cop would just shoot him. Yep. So there's situations in prison that people don't read about in books or see in TV movies, but the movie's written or the book is written and TV show is made out of stuff that really happened. You know? um, there's always some people making money some kind of way in those places. I've seen you've seen people that can draw, in prison. They're very good artists. A lot of creative minds in there, believe it or not. And then there's situations where people don't want to be anything besides, monsters. The whole entire yard's made up of monsters. Everybody's there is to harm and to hurt. You know, um, the challenges of everyday life were, you know, they were immense in certain ways. But once you establish yourself as someone to be respected, they diminished. But then there's people who always wanted to pretend like they're tough, and you had to deal with them. You know what I'm saying?
Going back to what you said earlier, then you said that when you first came in, they tested you physically and then they tested you mentally.
Yep.
Do you remember the very first physical test?
The very first physical test was went to the weight pile, and someone made a comment, "You can't lift this." I said I can lift this much. Yeah, so I lift that much, right? And then right after it, because you're stiff, right? I bet you can't hit this ball, stuff like that. Those simple little tests. Then after that, somebody wanted to fight, so you fight them. I was fortunate enough to have some skills, and some people didn't have. You know, And then they want to get in the ring, and whole different animal, boxing. So I did it. I completed the task of proving my physicality, you know. But then they send a homosexual your way, and what I did to the homosexual, you don't know, you know. I mean, because I'm not gay, you know. And dude put his hand on me. If his hand is, he can use his hand again. It's fortunate. Man, I broke 8 of his fingers, but 8 bones in his hand. He put his hands on me. You shouldn't put your hands on people. You know, you have to ask them if they, if they want to do something or whatever. Some people think that automatically because they're in that place, you want to have sex with them. So that's the deal. Those are the
And what
physical.
and what were the mental challenges they gave you?
The mental challenges. They want to know if you could read. They want to know what knowledge you did have, or what knowledge you possessed. If you had critical thinking, and they didn't call it that. Um, they wanted to see how far you could go with certain type of pressures. And then once they found out I was a Marine, they stopped. They stopped. They said, okay, you're a Marine. I said, yeah. And so they knew I could deal with certain pressures. So they stopped. Yeah. Those were mental challenges. But the administration, they were different. The administration always, they knew they had the upper hand, right? So they're trying to provoke you. And this one cop will walk up to you and he'd say, hey, boy, pick up that cigarette butt you dropped. I said, I don't smoke. I saw you do it. I said, I don't smoke. Well, I found some cigarettes in your area. I'm going to write you up. I said, well, I don't smoke, officer. And then they write you up for something that wasn't real. That's their mental challenge. So you're able to deal with the pressure of them harassing you. I was about to ask you a question, but I said, you got
We
another
were
question?
talking. Yeah, I've got endless questions. You were
Give it to me,
talking
bub.
about you were talking about doors being welded closed.
Yes.
Did
Cells.
you ever come? Did you ever come across Robert Wayne Vickers, aka
Yeah, I know who. I know who. I know who. I
Bonsai?
forget. Yeah, but Bonsai was his name. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know who he was. Little skinny white boy.
yeah. And he ended up. They welded his door shut, and they ended up giving him the death penalty. Did you know any stories about him? He was considered
Well,
one of the most dangerous inmates.
no. Let me give it to you, brother. Okay, people like him. There's a whole bunch of people like him. Whole bunch. They wanted to fit in with certain groups, and they weren't qualified. So he decided to kill his cellie for no reason, stab him to death, and carve his name in his back or something. Okay, and he knew that would be, looked at as something extremely heinous. It was heinous. And so they put him in a hole and they wouldn't let him out of the cell. They wouldn't. Because he knew it was stupid. Not because he was so dangerous. It looked like he was stupid. Then this one guy goes out on a 3-day pass and he met his mother. Now, this is what's weird to me. Why don't you meet your mother at a motel? Your mother at a motel. She's a grown woman, an old lady, and you're a grown man, 29, 30 years old. What are you going to a motel room with your mother for? And he kills her when she's naked. Yeah. So those were a couple of people that thought was super, super dangerous. But Bonsai, if you weren't asleep, Bonsai couldn't deal with you. He couldn't. He wasn't physical capable. He wasn't. He had no strength. He had no abilities. He was just a psycho, mentally disturbed individual.
They said he could get out of his handcuffs real easy and open the doors.
Well, there's guys 6'4", 320 pounds that do that. How? I don't know, but they do. Now him opening doors, that's a lie. He couldn't open doors. There were cells, and the cops had the key to the mechanisms. You open it like a little for a power cabinet thing. You open it, key, open it, pull levers, and the cells open. How could he open a cell? He couldn't. And it wasn't like you throw a rope and you hook on something and pull it. No. No, some people exaggerate things. There's a guy, Jesse Bojorquez. He killed a cop. Okay. Now he gained instant respect. He became the leader of the Mexican mafia. Okay. They were dangerous people. Very dangerous. Because they had no recourse but to be that way.
Who would you say is the most dangerous person you ever came across?
Well, one person comes to mind. His name was Mac McDonald. He was a Marine. He was Fast Company Marine. And he had killed this bouncer at Scottsdale at a former ASU football player. And the guy jumped on him. He was stronger than Mac. Mac stabbed him in his back with his K-bar. But then one punched him on the side. It broke his rib, and the rib went into his heart.
Oh.
Yeah. So Mac was the most dangerous person I ever met.
Oh. Rib into the heart, man. Wow.
He could hit, he could punch. That's the most dangerous person. There's other people who were stupid. They weren't dangerous. They were just stupid. No mental.
You were talking about the guards taking bets. A couple of the guys I interviewed were in Corcoran prison in California, and they had gladiator games. They had the death reports written up. They had the ambulance waiting, and all the staff would come out, and the guards formed their own gang. Yeah, the guards formed their own gang.
There's cops called the Wolf Pack. Cops called the Wolf Pack, and all kinds of shit. They did what they did. They're just like anybody else. And like I said, administration was the biggest challenge. Not of the inmates, administration. Because they could lock you up for nothing. They could lie and plant dope on you and drugs.
So you've seen it change then from like Florence prison, the Wild West, to just like industrial prisons everywhere, the prison industrial complex, the cameras get installed. And I imagine that, like you said at the very beginning, the tactics have changed from the gangs to adapt to the environments that have changed.
What was the question again?
About how you've gone from Florence prison, where it was the Wild West, to now the high-tech industrial warehouses, housing, and how the tactics of the gangs have changed over the years.
Well, that's a really good question. That's a brilliant question. Matter of fact, the warehousing system is so benign. It's so stupid. It's so crazy. It's so sickening. They know there's going to be conflict. They know it's going to be problems, right? And they got one cop for 200 people. How's that make any sense? How's that cop supposed to watch everything? So they have cameras in there, right? And the cameras don't catch everything. The Okay, because the camera's not in the bathrooms and not in the showers. Okay, so you know the gangs have approached the officers to bring in their drugs, to bring in their weapons. They get the cops. Okay, I'm not gonna say any prison names because you never know who's watching these things, but
Yeah.
it had just packed people, big open bay. Okay, those little rows and rows of bunks. Okay, and these little walls in between each area. And some people they get it done so that all their little group is in one little area. Okay, and they always got a watchdog sitting there up, just looking around. Okay, and we don't smoke cigarettes. Okay, I was seeing you sitting there, and some guy lights a cigarette, and you look at him and you say, "Hey, bro, you lost your motherfucking mind, dude." He goes, "What? This is my area. This is my air." I said, "This is your air." And you don't hesitate. You can't ask for permission. You don't say, please. You know, you better have your technique flawlessly. So me, hit him in the neck. He drops. Right? Now, some people would, once you drop, some people take the boot to you. Okay? The white boys. White boys are ruthless. You know this personally. Them white boys get a hold of you, it is something you don't want to experience. Those white boys will put you in the mud, okay? And they do it with no recourse, no stopping. I mean, so he was a white guy and 6'2", 280, and he pushed a lot of people around, but he couldn't push T-Bone around, you know. And I didn't get no permission because I knew they put him beside me to start shit. And he lit that cigarette up. And I looked at him on the ground. His eyes are on me like this, bugging out his head. And so I bent down in front of him. He's messing with his neck. Ow! It had been his right eye. Okay? His eye said, just start poking out. And so he was in pain. So I hit him in his temple and I put him out. And so the cops watched this and they made the call. Right? Man, they sent 30 cops in there to get me. 30. And I dealt with the situation, the best I could, and I went on about my business. After I got out of the hole, when I came back to the yard, they gave me the same bunk, same neighbor, and I said, you trying to start some shit to the SSU cop, right? Oh no. I said, yeah, you are. You're trying to start some shit. I said, this is how you treat people in warehouses. Well, no one's supposed to smoke. And he said it real loud, right? And I didn't say anything about smoking. But the word went around that, I don't smoke and I don't like it. So the cops know these things, and that's one of their ways of keeping tension and pressure, in situations. So then there's, situations where there's female officers, right? And there's a lot of female officers nowadays, a lot more than men. And they know that most of the guys are horny. So they do certain little techniques to entice. And so there's officers in the back. There's a CO3 office, and there's an office behind that one. Then there's another office, and it goes into the bathroom. And then there's little not auditorium, little areas where people can have classes and stuff. And on both sides, okay? And a couple of places, the rooms are really dark. Okay. And so I'm gonna say the person's name. Her name was, okay. She would take people in the back, and they'll be in there for 40 freaking minutes. Why would you go in the back room with an inmate for 40 freaking minutes? After 5 minutes, people start thinking something wrong. You know what I mean? And so one day I said, okay, I'll wait to see what she's doing, right? And I walked past the room. I heard some slurping, you know. And so she ended up giving the guy a blowjob, right? And the administration knew, right? So I said, if the administration knew this, you know, why is she doing what she's doing? Because she'd get busted. Well, it turned out to be that some people went and paid this person and that person and this person. And today's prison isn't like in Florence, you know, you have to pay a bunch of people off. Nowadays, you pay off a group of people so you can do what you want. That's one of the main differences. And the officers, they bring in the drugs, they bring in telephones. Oh my God. Man, I was on the yard where 98% of people in the yard had a phone. Yeah. They put the little earbuds in, the ones they ain't supposed to have, and they turn the phone on, they walk and talk. Everybody taking lapses on the phone. Every 300 people walking laps. You know how it was. It never was like that. So there, you know, those are big differences from yesterday to today.
Wow.
For years now, I've been looking at how women have been degraded, how women have been shamed, how women have been made to look and feel like they're second-hand citizens or second-class citizens, that their value is nothing. The only thing they're supposed to do is do whatever the man tells them to do, because that's what they're made to do. So I went to did research, and so I started with the Bible, and it came to Adam and Eve, and I studied and studied and studied, and God said He made Adam a helpmate, and she was a one man, and so I let God speak to my heart, and that made them equal. If a man lifts 1,000 pounds, a woman can lift 500. If a man can shoot 1,000 yards, a woman can shoot 1,200 yards. If a man can fly to the moon, so can a woman, but she's the one that did the math for the rocket to come back. So a lot of people don't want to accept that type of thinking because they're chauvinistic values or patriarchal values or teachings. And for so many centuries, all of us have been taught to think about each other a certain way, especially when it comes to men and women relationships. Women are only good for this, and that's it. So I looked at, you know, Jesus, and then I said, oh, wait a minute. What about Mary? Why did God choose Mary to bring Jesus into this world? Who is she? And He filled my heart with this knowledge. Mary was a woman of courage at 15 years old, immense wisdom at 15 years old, resilient, dedicated, loyal, steadfast, just powerful in all the positive attributes that people or mankind has. And I went, wow. So it just couldn't be just anyone. He chose a Pacific, strong woman at 15 years old. And Joseph, her husband, he couldn't be no slouch either. But the foundation that God gave us to look at is that woman. And We refused to talk about it. We refused to develop it. And so God put it in my heart to spread that news. So when Jesus came onto this earth, the very first miracle Jesus did was turn water into wine. It was for a woman, his mother. Then throughout the Bible, he talked to women. And at that day and age, a man couldn't talk to a woman just so freely. It was against the rules. And a woman could get stoned to death just by a thought because she was doing something she shouldn't do. And I said, why do women wear all those big, long clothing? It must have been hot. Well, so none of hers could be shown because men were so weak-minded. They see a woman's toe, they might get sexually aroused. So women had to wear long clothing and put stuff on their hair so that they couldn't show who they are. And I asked myself, that's what God designed, or this is man's thoughts? Well, God made us in his image spiritually. So no, it wasn't God's design to tell people to dress like that. It was man's thoughts because of the way he thinks. And Jesus walked up on a situation where this woman's getting ready to be stoned. And God said to me, well, she couldn't commit adultery unless she was with a man. So how come the man wasn't getting stoned is the question. Men were allowed to do whatever they wanted, but the woman got stoned because the man committed adultery with her. She had committed adultery, so she should be stoned. What about the man? So that question came into my heart. And God kept teaching me about what takes place in the world. How people are always running around in circles, trying to find ways to manipulate or con or just say and do things to keep other people under their thumb. So God took me to the church and the period of power and control when the church was always putting people into a frame of mind so they could control them. And God said to me, well, that's what mankind has done to women. We'll give them 50 cents on the dollar, or a man makes the whole dollar. Or 35 cents on the dollar, while a man makes 75 cents on the dollar. And I wasn't comfortable with it, and I'm not accepting it today. So God kept teaching me and teaching me and teaching me about how women have done so much. It's like in England, for example, when the men and women went to battle, they fought together back in the day against the Romans. And then when men went off to battle, women were left there by themselves with the children, some at a very young age, but they had to raise those kids. It took strength. It took resilience. It took composure. It took wisdom. And that's the attribute God put in women. For that reason, we should take a look at who we are and understand that it's equal. It isn't a two thing, it's a one thing. If you have a helpmate, you're one. You work together, like Sean and his wife. Anyways, I kept doing research and I kept learning, I kept listening. And then he took me to the beginning when Jesus was in the tomb. And Jesus didn't have the men come prepare spices for his body, it was the women. At that time, they put guards around the tomb. They would kill you, just spear you or chop your head off with a sword. And they didn't care. Especially, they didn't care if they did it to women. But a group of women went there with spices to prepare Jesus' body. And the earthquake, and an angel came and sat in the tomb. And the angel spoke to the women. And I said, wow, I get it now. So God sent a messenger to the women. And why did he choose women to spread the message? Because the angel said to the women, go tell the others. So I said, whoa, this is kind of deep. And I listened and I listened, and you have to be very strong. You have to be very wise, very wise. You have to be resilient, dedicated, loyal. You have to have bravery. You have to have love, compassion, and empathy within you, flowing out of you for God to choose you to go do that at that time. Those were the women. The men were cowards. The men stayed back. And when they got the message that he is risen, it came from the women. And that made my heart overflow with joy, and it uplifted me, and it brought me to a positive place within me about who I am, because as a man, I know now that it isn't about power and strength that gives us what we have. It's about empathy, compassion, and wisdom. And in the Bible, her name is Lady Wisdom. And I came to that epiphany that my responsibility is to continue doing what I'm doing, but also just to be treated equally in the class of sex, the genders, male and female. There's no woman who's lesser than a man. There's no man who's lesser than a woman. We're equal. Yes, men have physical strength, masculinity, but women have physical strength and femininity, and they can carry a baby for 9 months. I mean, it's the writing is right there, but we just don't want to read it. Take a look and look at yourself. If you feel in your heart that women are lesser than you, are you a man? Because a real man doesn't feel fear or shame or doubt if a woman has intelligence or strength. He feels gratitude because all of us who's alive today has a mother. And when I was growing up, I wanted to know something. There's only one person I went to. It was my mother. Hey, mom. Hey, mom. And you look around, you always hear people saying, hey, mom. Hey, mom. They asked the mother for it, and the mother always had the wisdom to give to the children because it's God breathed within them. And we should take time to look at ourselves and understand that and start to respect one another as way God intended us to do, to respect one another and appreciate one another and not to shame one another, but to uplift, motivate, and encourage to say and do the right things. I know.
Well, listen, bro. Listen, brother. We're gonna close this one here because I gotta do more stuff tonight. But viewers watching this, I imagine you guys are as mind blown as I am. Can you imagine being in
People are
Arizona
watching this
prison?
live.
No, I'm just talking to the people who are going to be watching.
Okay.
It.
All right.
Yeah. So can you imagine being in prison for over 30 years? The amount of stories that Tim has, the amount of things that he's seen. Do you remember if you go back to John's jail journal when I first met Tim, and he's talking about the smell on the run from so many dudes getting assaulted, and he's talking, all the different things that he's seen, eyes coming out, and these are just some of the details I'm remembering off the top of my head from our first conversation. So what we're going to do, I'm sure you're going to be delighted with this, viewers. We hope to do a series of podcasts with Tim, and I was working on his book with him before he went back in 11, 12 years ago, whatever it was. We're gonna continue with that, and for all of the long-term supporters of T-Bone, especially the people in the T-Bone Appreciation Society, I sent Tim the link to it so he can read all the comments now coming in. Huge thank you to everyone who's supported Tim over the years. Huge thank you to people who've donated to him over the years. If you want to help to donate to help him rebuild his life, there is a link in the description box if you're watching this on YouTube, folks. And, Tim is not a blowhard. I've been in there. I've seen everything he's done. He has served for the government as a U.S. Marine. and he's put his life on the line for his sense of justice, doing what he believed was right, helping these people he didn't even know. And I never saw anyone. I was incarcerated for 6 years. I never saw anyone. It was dog eat dog, people stabbing each other in the back, raw survival of the fittest. The weak were just allowed to perish, and no one was stepping up. No one was stepping up like Tim was stepping up. So if you want to support him, the T-Bone Appreciation Society link is down there. If you want to join up on Facebook, you can keep up on updates on what Tim's doing. The donation link is down there. And please put questions in the comments for Tim. So when we do part 2, we can do more stories from his life, and then also we'll ask him your questions. So whatever you're curious about, what's happened to Tim over the years, put it in the comments, and I will read all those to him, just like I did 20 years ago with John's Jail Journal when we had the printouts and the questions would come in from the viewers.
Yes.
And Tim, what would you like to say then to all the people who have just finally watched this, your first podcast after all these years thinking about you and supporting you? What would you like to say to those people, my friend?
Well, once again, I'd like to thank everyone for the support they've provided. God bless you and thank you so very much. There's no words that I can give that really shows, excuse my emotion, I can't say thank you enough. That was so kind, so wonderful. The people supported me the way they did. And for you, Sean, for being the honorable man that you are, for pushing it forward. So many people won't do that. But that's the kind of man you are that God blessed me with in you. And I really appreciate you. I would like to say that, someone asked me that question today. Kirsten asked that question. She said, what message would you give people? And, yeah, some of the stories are horrific. Some of the stories are brutal, but that's what the situation was. But what we all have inside is what makes the difference. And if you have any kindness, any goodness in your heart, and you see somebody who needs help, help them. Don't turn a blind eye to it. Don't, you can if you like, but because we make our choices, but it feels so good at the end of the day when you ain't just wasting your time by working and doing whatever, even though work isn't a waste of time, but there's opportunities to help people. Do it. If it's a homeless guy being picked on, if it's your neighbor and you can hear him through the walls as her man beats her up or she beats her kids viciously or whatever, you step up and you do something about it. And I was graced with the ability to think and to put myself in a position to help certain people. And I've been hurt, and by the grace of God, I'm still here. And, let the love shine. That's the most important thing. Just let the love shine that's in your heart. Like my buddy Sean, I love that guy. And, I'll be over there one day, I believe. And we'll have some good English outings, go around the countryside and enjoy the English food and look at the beauty of England.
We sure will, my brother. And I
Yes.
remember yeah.
Go ahead.
I remember when I was getting released, and you said to me, at bat, when guys are getting released, they promise things, and then you never hear from them again until a year later, and they're back in the prison. And I said, Tim, I'm going back to England, and I will always support you. I will always be here for you. And I'm just so honored, brother, that 20 years later, I'm looking at you right now, and we're continuing right where we left off.
Wow. It's been 20 years. Wow.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that. It's been 20 freaking.
You haven't aged, man. You look really young still.
Well, something. God does it for a reason.
Yeah.
He does it for a reason. He does it. There's a purpose in everything. So
Goodbye, viewers. Much love and respect wherever you are in the world. Let us know in the comments and put questions in the comments for Tim, please. And we will see you with T-Bone podcast number 2 coming soon. Thank you for tuning in.